what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each episode we celebrate a movie that my guests love. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. Today we're talking about two Irishmen who were based in England but hiding in Belgium. It's In Bruges with my friend Steve Kind in the hot seat. This movie is a riot, especially if your sense of humor, like ours, has a certain dark twist. But it is also, if this isn't too grand, an exploration of sin and the possibility of redemption. We wrestle with and have fun with all of that. Steve and I have worked together in the recovery world, and we touch on that in our conversation. Steve has written a book about his own recovery experience, Inspirational Dissatisfaction. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. So please join us on today's journey as we spend a little time in Bruges. In Bruges, get it? Because that's the title of the movie? I really have to stop trying to be funny in these intros. Probably in general. Steve Kind, how the hell are you doing today?
I am doing well, toes are tapping.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about In Bruges. But before we get to that, Steve, I want to talk about you a little bit. Or really, I want you to talk about you. What's your history as a movie fan? What are some of your early movie memories?
Oh, boy, I tell you what, I grew up in the theaters. My brother was actually an usher, so I got discounted tickets, so that was always nice. But I would do everything any movie that came out, I was interested in going and seeing as long as it was age appropriate to a point.
Let's be honest, Steve, you were interested if they weren't age appropriate. You probably just weren't allowed if they weren't age
The
appropriate.
admittance became a problem. My brother did take me to Dirty Harry at the drive-in before it was age appropriate, but that's neither here nor there. I tell you, I used to do these marathon movie days on a Saturday. Cine 2 was our local theater, and they would have like a Three Stooges festival, or they would have a Marx Brothers. I was always a huge Marx Brothers fan. They would have a Marx Brothers festival. I remember going to the Planet of the Apes-a-thon. So I would sit literally for 6, 8 hours watching these movies with like-minded moviegoers. I'm also the type that if I like the movie, I don't put it on the shelf. I revisit it, and I revisit it quite often. And a lot of times, even when they were in the theater, I would go back and go back and go back. I saw Jaws, I think, 17 times in the theater. I think I saw American Graffiti 23 times. Star Wars, I don't even have a number, but if I liked the movie and it grabbed me for that 2-hour span, I couldn't think of a lot better way to spend 2 hours. I guess I wasn't real athletic as a kid. It was more, let's get in the dark theater and enjoy the buttered popcorn and pour the butter on the floor so I could slip slide around. I was a kid.
I love it. I'm with you on those triple, quadruple feature days. I can rarely do that anymore, but I do sneak away for a double feature day, even now at my ripe old age, and can enjoy the hell out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you mentioned a few on the early side for you. I am jealous to have not seen Jaws in theaters in particular. I have seen the re-release, including the beautifully remastered one that came out last year. But what are some, maybe I'm going past childhood, Steve, what are some standout movie theater experiences for you over the years? Like those movies where you just said, wow.
Well, mine are a little bizarre because I got into, well, first of all, my hormones were racing as a very young child. So I had a big crush on certain actresses, Madeline Kahn. She was big in my world. I liked just goofy, funny movies for the most part. Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother. That is a movie that almost nobody knows, but to me, it made me laugh out loud in the theater. So, if it had some kind of comedy in it, I was all in. I was going to go check it out. In the theater, Those were the things that stood out.
Well, let's get into the movie. Would you like to give us an elevator synopsis of what In Bruges is about?
Well, I'll give you the 3-floor elevator speech on In
Woo!
Bruges, just very short. It's basically following 2 hitmen. 2 hitmen that have been sent to Bruges by their boss. It never really says if he's like the mob godfather or whatever. Just we know that he's their boss, and he sends them to Bruges because something had gone wrong. And what had gone wrong was during the commission of a hit. Now, these 2 men that are sent to Bruges are both hitmen from London. And in the commission of one of the characters' one and only hit contracts, he does kill the person he's supposed to kill, but he also kills a child by mistake. And now you don't really know why they're going to Bruges, but that gets revealed throughout the movie. Really, to see in Bruges and look at it from the surface, it's just a dark comedy. It's got some unbelievably funny lines. It's got some great character development, all this stuff. I guess I'm going to the 4th floor and the 5th floor here, but it's about way more than that. Once you've seen this movie, you start to realize it's not there just for the comedy. It's there for what the theme of that movie is. And that theme is yes, it's dark, but it's more about guilt, a redemption, heaven, hell, regret, honor. There's a lot to unpack in Bruges. The funny lines are great, but there's a whole lot behind those lines.
So you've hit a little on this already for us, but of all the movies you could have picked for your first episode in here, and for all of them, why In Bruges? What speaks to you so much about this one?
Well, it literally makes me laugh out loud. The characters, the way they say the lines, it's not just the lines themselves, but the way they deliver these lines are so unbelievably well timed, and they play off of each other so well. And the 2 main characters, Ken and Ray, they're 2 people that you wouldn't think would ever be together in a lifetime. And they show why, because they're kind of opposites in many, many respects. But it's just this funny movie that made me actually out loud laugh. And that's fairly rare. Usually it's kind of a chuckle, usually, but this just made me laugh.
I have seen this movie probably half a dozen times. I have a feeling you've seen it more than that. And watching it yesterday, I was laughing out loud. And it's like, I know these lines. I love how you mentioned how character based the comedy is, and really how character based this movie is. Like, a lot of crime movies are about their plot, right? But I think this one's more about its character. So I'd love to start there. Why don't you pick a character to start us off with, and we can just go back and forth a little on what we think of the character and the performance?
Well, let's start with Ray, Colin Farrell character. I mean, it is not your typical normal Colin Farrell character. Usually he's the leading man in a romantic comedy, or he's an action hero, or he played a great vampire. But in this one, he's actually kind of daft. He's not real bright. And he's very opinionated about everything around him, including Bruges itself, which it's a shithole. That's his word. It's a shithole. He even says that to somebody from Bruges who he's trying to impress. He calls it a shithole. But he's just not his normal character in this movie. He's very introspective, even though he's not real bright. He's very introspective, and he's got some deep, deep core feelings that he deals with throughout this movie.
You hit on this to a degree, but I was thinking what a non-movie star performance this is. Like, he's
Absolutely.
he's funny, but he's really low charisma, and he's subdued with outbursts as opposed to being kind of the high energy live wire we know Colin Farrell can be
Yeah.
sometimes. Just frankly, a bold role for a movie star to take on at a point in his career that he was very hot.
Well, I tell you, you talk about characters, there's no end to the characters in this movie. You've got Ray, you've got Ken, the other hitman, played so beautifully by Brendan Gleeson. Unbelievable performance, but everything I've ever seen him in, he's always unbelievably good. Ralph Fiennes, he's not your typical mob boss. The man is he's maniacal, he's methodical, but he's got a sense of humor. And especially when he confronts people, like we'll talk about maybe Eric and the gunshot later. He's merciless. Anybody disagrees with this guy, he's going to put you in your place. So you've got that character. You've got Jimmy the midget, or excuse me, dwarf, and then you've got Chloe, and you've got Eric, the one who gets shot in the eye or the blank in his eye. Every one of them, I swear, the person who actually did the casting for this movie deserves the Academy Award just for this singular movie.
I would agree. It's an incredible cast. And I think Martin McDonagh, the director, of course, especially at the time, more famous as a playwright than as a film writer or director. And for me, that shows through in how specifically drawn each of these characters are. Like it's a fairly limited cast,
Yeah,
but we get to know every one of those characters.
including the woman who owns the hotel.
Oh, I love her. Like that
Yeah, she's
that's
fantastic. I don't even know who the actress is, but she is unbelievably good in this role.
I looked her up. She is Swiss, I believe, and she's not done much English language work at all. She speaks impeccable English, better English than I do. But yes, she's maybe the smallest of the speaking roles, at least the people who appear more than just for a moment. And even she makes a big impression. The Ken Ray relationship is something different than I think we're accustomed to seeing in crime movies. Maybe it's fair to say movies in general. What is their dynamic? What makes it special?
It's almost like a father-son relationship rather than a mentor-mentee kind of a relationship in that Ken is trying to culture Ray. Ray's having none of it, and he pitches a Moody. He gets all upset because he's supposed to be taking in all this history, and as Ray says in the movie, "Oh, it's just a bunch of stuff that's already happened, isn't it?" It's like he doesn't appreciate any kind of culture that Ken's trying to bring to the role. Ken's not only trying to kinda guide him through what's going on, but I think he knows early on, even before he's told, I think he knows why they're there. And it's almost like he's trying to find something redeemable in Ray that will stop him from having to do what he thinks he's gonna have to do while he's there. So it's got all these different elements of the play between these 2 characters, the father-son kinda thing and trying to, eh, bring him into adulthood because he is kind of a petulant child. But I love Ray's look at Ken in that at first he's kind of an irritation. He's upset that he's gotta share a room with him. That's one of the things that bothers him. Bruges is a shithole. Now he finds out it's gonna be one room for the 2 of them, and he's like, "With you? That's the big problem with that." But throughout the movie, both of them get this it's never quick. It's just this really slight, we're getting closer, we're getting closer, we're getting closer. I think really where it kinda gets to the point where they're friends is the drug scene. We can talk about that a little bit later, but the drug scene and the fact that they both walk out separately, but pretty much at the same time because they both have had enough of the bullshit that's going on. Pardon my French, but in that scene in that room.
Great call out with Ken Gleason's character being something of a father figure. I was thinking when you said that of even the scene when Ray comes back into the hotel room and he's making noise and Ken's trying to sleep. And it's funny, even watching it multiple times, I always kind of expect Ken to blow up at him. And instead, it's this very fatherly thing of, I'm annoyed, but I understand the kid's kind of drunk and he's excited to tell me something. And I'm not going to blow up at him. I'm going to ultimately listen to what he has to say. I'm even going to make a compromise with him about being able to go on his date. It does have a very fatherly quality. And you make an interesting point there that I'd love for you to expand on a little bit, of him maybe realizing even before he gets the phone call that he's there to kill Ray. Do you think he consciously realizes that, or do you think it's more an emotional thing that then becomes conscious later?
I think he knows it because he's worked for Harry for quite some time. Now, you might not know that the first time you watch this movie, but on my 27th viewing or something, you kind of get the feeling that just because he knows Harry, he knows why they've been sent here. Now he puts on the ruse with Ray, saying maybe we're here on a job. He gives Ray that little piece of sunshine, saying that maybe the only reason we're here is because we're supposed to kill somebody here, but we're not going to know until Harry calls. So I think he knows what's coming, but I think he's trying to put Ray at ease. And I don't think that initially he was Ray's savior. He was not somebody who was going to not do what Harry wanted. He knew he was probably going to have to kill Ray. But eventually, the scene in the park, he does decide to kill Ray. And that's cut short later.
Let's dig into that. So, for anybody who hasn't watched it, when he is going to kill Ray, he's walking up with a gun with a silencer. Ray pulls out his own gun that he has stolen from his date the night before and is about to kill himself. And with what can only be seen as irony, Ken decides in that moment not only to not kill him, but to save him from himself.
Yes. Yes. It's an amazing scene. And and what I think was amazing from the filmmaker, from McDonough, the way he leads everything down this kind of rabbit hole into talking about Ray's contemplation of suicide. I don't know if you remember, but the series of scenes, it starts with this really sad looking dog, and Ray is staring at this sad looking dog, and then the camera goes to Ray, and Ray is looking just as sad as that dog. And then Ray's view goes to these kids with their parents in the square, and that brings back the memory to Ray of killing the child. That scene is the scene where he kills the priest and ends up killing the child. And then it goes from there to the museum scene where they are looking at paintings of Judgment Day and these horrific depictions of what hell may be like, or what purgatory may be like.
And I will note there that is the only art or architecture that Ray seems to respond to in all of Bruges.
Yes, yes, the rest is just a shithole. And then it goes from that to a discussion between Ray and Ken, where Ken is saying basically everybody I killed deserved it except one guy. And so he's trying to say, yeah, I'm okay with everybody I killed except for one guy. And Ray starts to try and justify the killing of the guy that Kent felt bad about killing. And it's because he had a bottle, which comes up later in another scene, bottle punching a woman. I know I sound like I'm rambling off here, but it's a very hard movie to not go off into these tributaries. And it goes to him talking about killing himself in that scene where he goes, well, they're talking about judgment and all that thing, and there's this long pause, and Ray starts to choke up, and he's talking about the incident that he killed a kid, And it's just this really tight line down the road. Here is why we're dealing with some serious issues here. And I've always figured, and I did some basic research before I came on here, but I always had the feeling this was purgatory. Bruges was purgatory. He even escapes and gets thrown back into purgatory.
Yeah.
It's such a clever movie. It's hard not to see those scenes and just pull a lot out of them that on your first viewing, you may or may not catch exactly what's going on.
One thing I really thought about on this viewing that you're bringing to mind for me is a playwright, not surprisingly, goes with the concept of Chekhov's gun, where literally and metaphorically that we see that gun before it goes off. In this movie, like, everything is a Chekhov's gun. Like, you mentioned the wine bottle, the movie set. There are so many things. It's one thing for a literal gun to go off. Like, yeah, we see that coming. We know Chekhov's gun or major plot points. But in this movie, there are so many small things. The trip to the tower, that all comes back around as we get into the second and third act of the movie. It's amazing what a clockwork movie this is that way without, I think, feeling like a clockwork movie as you watch it.
And some of those exact things are so subtle. Ray is out telling these rather large Americans that they shouldn't go up into the tower because it's a lot of windy stairs, and they get offended. Well, when later Harry and Kent go to the tower, it's closed because some American had a heart attack. Every time you turn around, he's coming back to something that you had learned earlier in the movie, and he puts it in this part of the movie. It's an amazing piece of work.
And a lesser movie would hit that so hard, and we would see that it was the guy who they talked to. We don't even know for sure if that's the guy who had the heart attack. We certainly heavily suspect it,
Right.
but they don't put a flourish on it. It just kind of is there. If we're paying attention, we get that it's a reference back to that.
Yeah.
Yes, everything counts in this movie. Every little moment, can pop back up later.
Even the dream sequence. We're talking about when Ken is lying to Harry about what Ray said about Bruges, trying to make Harry think that Ray liked Bruges, even though Ray by no means liked Bruges. But he says it was like a dream. And then just a few scenes down the road, they're shooting a dream sequence in the movie that is being filmed in Bruges.
I didn't even think of that one. But again, this one's so loaded. I'm sure there's a dozen of them I'm missing. So, with talking about the first suicide scene, the abortive suicide scene, and this movie has multiple suicide scenes in it. I don't think we mentioned earlier, these are London based, at least we believe London based hitmen, but they are both Irish. And of course, McDonough's British Irish. Without it being explicit, it feels
Ski.
to me like there is a theme of Catholicism as related to the potential suicides in this movie. I'm wondering if that's something you feel as well, and maybe how you place that in the thematic elements of the movie.
Oh, I would definitely agree with that because they do mention purgatory, and that's kind of a construct from Catholicism.
True, true.
They also visit the church of I can't remember the name of it, but where it's supposedly got a small vial of Jesus's blood and that it's turned back into water, into liquid, and then dried back out. And so there's a lot of that mysticism around it as well.
Absolutely. I believe that affects Ken in that moment. Like, to be murdered is no sin. If he lets Ray take his own life, that's a sin from which he cannot recover.
Right.
He's thinking of this child as his son. Soon after that is telling him how he can redeem himself. It goes from this potential act that can't be redeemed, a moment of at least speaking of redemption, if maybe not achieving it in the moment. Another thing I was thinking of along those lines is the movie they are making in the square is apparently a remake of Don't Look Now, which is a Donald Sutherland, a Julie Christie movie about them going to Venice because of their grief over the death of their daughter. And just another of those things that we're talking about. I believe, I don't remember how old the daughter is in that movie, but interesting that it's about the death of a child, and
Yeah.
that's there in the remake, and also feels like it plays in those themes of an ancient European city, faith being an element of it. What is your standout scene in this movie?
Oh, there are so many.
Oh, it's an unfair question. I
I
get to
would
do that.
say what one of the most standout scenes for me, I guess, would be the confrontation of Harry when he finally does get to Bruges to confront Ken because Ken let Colin Farrell go. He finds out that he not only didn't kill him, but he stopped him from killing himself, which absolutely flabbergasts Harry. He doesn't understand this. And Ken is totally open to, okay, it's a little bit busy down here. We don't want to do this. We're going to have to find another place for you to kill me, is what he's getting to. So he suggests going to the tower. And then it's that whole scene of them going to the tower, the confrontation with the guy, honestly, who runs the tower. That if you see this movie, you really kind of want him to take a beating. And he does at Harry's hand. And then getting to the top of that tower and Ken just basically saying, you know what, we're not having a shootout. I'm done fighting. Do your worst. I respect you. I think you're a man of honor. Even though earlier, now this is where the C word whips out a little bit, but earlier when they first sit down, literally Brandon Gleason says, Harry, you're a cunt. You've always been a cunt. You'll always be a cunt, kid. You know what's going to change? You're just going to become a bigger cunt and have some cunt kids. He says, now you leave my cunt kids out of this, right? I mean, it's this explosive little get together there, but then they're up in the tower and you realize these guys are old friends. These guys are people who have worked together for a long time, respect each other. And bizarrely, it ends up that Harry doesn't want to kill him, and so he shoots him in the leg. And while bringing him down the stairs, he finds out that Ray is back in Bruges and he's ready to go kill him. So they have a tussle over a gun and Kent gets shot in the neck. So that whole thing from absolute confrontation down in the restaurant to this, I'm not going to fight you, Harry. Do what you got to do. And I love that immediately when Harry does shoot Kent, he didn't really mean it that much. But just that flip back and forth all the way through this trail of this scene that goes up to the tower and back down, I thought that was just cinematically, that was just such a great trail. Okay, you guys don't really like each other, but you find out, yes, they actually do like each other. They respect each other. They've known each other forever. And it's just a weird set of circumstances that brings it around to Kent actually getting shot.
And it strikes me, and you mentioned the words cinematic, that for much of this movie, McDonough's very still with the camera and lets the actors do the work. It is, in the best possible sense, something of a shot play. And there's twice that he really breaks out of that, to my viewing. And that is very much one of them. We get the rotating shot around Ray as they're walking by him and don't see him because he's making out with the girl.
Yeah.
And then the whole trip up the tower is this winding, moving camera that creates this dynamism as we're heading towards the conclusion of the movie. The one other part, just because I had never caught this before, believe it or not, there's the long tracking shot when Ken is going to get the gun, when he's giving him the direction and they do a long tracking shot of Ken. Right before that, he's watching a movie and it is Touch of Evil, which has one of the most famous tracking shots of all time in it. So
Yep.
just a great little McDonough touch there. So I will tell you, one of my two favorite scenes you already mentioned is the scene in the restaurant where he gets in the fight with what turned out to be Canadians. So I'll go to my other favorite, or at least like standout scene for me. When Ray is trying to leave Bruges, he is arrested on the train. And it turns out the Canadians are presumably coincidentally on that train. We don't find out exactly how they've identified him, but we see Ray's frankly idiocy. That's not very nice, but it's hard to say anything else. He can't come up with a good name for the cop. He basically pulled a Fletch, like where his name just doesn't end. And then Colin Farrell's gift for physical acting in that scene, like it's not dialogue free, but you see on his face this moment of like, am I gonna run? I'm on a train. There's not really much I can do. And there's even this element of, oh, they're Canadians, which kind of throws his whole game because he was so sure he had fought Americans in
Yeah,
revenge
they
for
didn't
John
kill
Lennon.
John Lennon.
So
Alright, I love the one line in that where they said, "We're bringing you back to Bruges," and he just goes, "Brilliant."
that scene is small and could be a throwaway, but I think it is just so telling of the humor and the tragedy in this movie. You mentioned him being dragged back into purgatory, and it is very much that, but we're going to do it with some dark laughs. And speaking of those laughs, I feel like one of the toughest things for movies to pull off effectively is tone shifts. And you mentioned this earlier that we don't find out right away that the child was killed. We hear early on that Ray did something wrong. Like we know the killing wasn't clean. It's right around the 25-minute mark where we have a flashback. He kills the great Akirian Hines, I think in an uncredited part as the priest.
Yep, yep.
And as he does so, he inadvertently shoots a child who I think is about 8 years old. And the movie from that point, it stays funny, but it now has to contend with this big revelation throughout. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about how it handles that tone shift, how it changes while remaining true to itself.
Wow, that's a big question. A lot of that is just in Colin Farrell's acting ability. It's amazing that he can go from he's talking to Chloe at the restaurant, and she's messing with him about his little joke that he says to her and insults. Well, she asks him if he knows any Belgian jokes, and he first says no, and then he says, "Wait a minute. Is this where you had the child abuse things that happen?" And she says, "Yeah." He says, "I guess I do know a Belgian joke." He says, "What two things is Belgium known for? Chocolates and child abuse. And they only invented the chocolates to get to the children." So it goes from she's messing with him. She throws back at him that one of her friends was one of the people that got abused, and she's just messing with him. It was just this rude, nasty thing to do, but she did. She made him feel bad. She actually says, "I just wanted to make you feel bad," and it worked.
I'm maybe going to reveal too much of myself here, Steve, but to my mind, that is a great fucking joke.
Oh yeah, yeah, me too. Yep. No, I agree. But
We have to have that dark laugh at his joke. If he says something just flat and not funny, her response then seems heavy-handed. It needs to be hilarious, and it is.
and for me, the acting ability of Colin Farrell, you talked about how this whole thing kind of keeps the heavy along with the comedy. He's struggling through this entire movie, and it's not always the same struggle. The obvious struggle of what he did with the kid and that kind of thing. But in this scene, Chloe gets up to go to the bathroom, and that's when the Canadian gets upset because he's in the table next to them, and Chloe's been blowing her cigarette smoke over their direction, and there's this confrontation between Ray and the Canadian, and you can see his struggle. He doesn't want to say anything because I don't remember exactly what the Canadian says. He says, unfucking believable. And Ray is struggling. He's like, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm supposed to lay low. He can't help himself. So he has to say, what's unbelievable? Are you talking to me? Yeah, I'm talking to you. What's unbelievable? Well, he talks about the cigarette smoke being blown in the face, and all of a sudden he just switches from this struggling, not trying to get into this, after having gone through the facial switches from Chloe and the joke and all of these layers all in this one little tiny compact scene. But then all of a sudden he's getting in a fight with, well, he's not getting in a fight, he's knocking out the Canadian. And then again, the wife stands up, the Canadian's wife stands up with the bottle and starts swinging. And there's another piece where earlier we were talking about the bottle. And so he punches the lady, knocks her out. And then Chloe comes back in and again, shift. Now he's concerned with the way that she's viewing him. I think he's a master at this kind of thing. I'm a huge Colin Farrell fan in the first place. And if you've seen kind of the stuff that he's done, I mean, the Penguin, an amazing piece of acting, whether you like the series or not. He's just so good in it. When he was in Fright Night, he was the scariest damn vampire I think I have ever seen, but yet he was charming. He's got such a range that he can handle these immediate shifts, and you feel those shifts. And in that little restaurant scene, he goes in about 10 different directions, all in this compact little scene. And I think that's one of the ways that they're able to keep that humor in, but yet deal with some very heavy topics. Because within 30 seconds, Colin Farrell is so depressed that he's ready to kill himself, but yet he's throwing off a couple of comic lines in the throes of that time.
I don't know that I'd ever call this movie exactly lighthearted, but in those first 25 minutes, we don't care that they're hitmen in a moral way because it's played as a little bit of a goof. Like, oh, we've got a comedy about these two hitmen. And boy, that moment hits like a sledgehammer because now we need to reckon with it morally. Now we really start to see how fucked up Ray is about this, rightfully. But they have laid enough track for us in that first 25 minutes that it doesn't feel like we were lied to. Like we look back and go, oh, we should have realized maybe more than we even did that this is a guy that's really struggling.
Yeah, yeah. No,
And I think
it's
you're
handled masterfully.
and I think you're right that it's so much down to Farrell walking a tightrope there. Interestingly, as we talk about his performance again, and second or third time we've hit it, and rightfully so. Steve, you and I know each other through addiction recovery circles. I assume you're okay with me saying that on the podcast.
Sure, that's fine.
I know we're both very public about our recovery journeys. So for me, this movie is a lot about recovery or the hope for recovery, not necessarily addiction recovery, but some sort of mental, spiritual recovery. And this is, as I understand it, Colin Farrell's first movie after getting sober himself. And he is famously a person in recovery and a huge advocate for recovery.
I
Um,
didn't know this was his first movie. Since
yeah,
then.
and yeah, he reported having been more nervous than he's ever been in his life making this because it was his first time in his movie career being sober. I'm interested in how you feel like this movie explores recovery themes, and if you're comfortable with it, how does it speak to you in your own recovery?
Wow, that's a big question.
We don't fuck around here, Steve. We hit the
Well, I can tell you early in recovery, I was back and forth. Do I wanna do this? Is this the right thing to do? I had to save my marriage, but I actually had to contemplate what is more important to me. I knew I loved my wife. I knew I had to make some sacrifice. I knew I had to do what I had to do. But as sad as it might be, that was a question, not an exclamation point. You got to quit. No, it's like, well, I got options here, but my options were bad or worse in my mind, and worse was losing my wife. So I had some dark moments in trying to get to my recovery initially. And a lot of that was kind of parallel just in the struggle that Ray has throughout the movie. I mean, really, it never ends for him, even to the end. But finding something outside of myself to distract myself was a huge part of my early recovery. We talk about the tools in smart recovery that they talk about finding a distraction or finding something that can, when you're having those urges or those cravings, to shift gears and to look at something else. And to me, that was the film and Chloe. He's just trying to find something to take his mind off of what he's struggling through right now. And that was me in a nutshell in my early recovery. So that, I guess that would be my biggest comparison between that and my recovery.
You mentioned the scene on the train as him coming back into purgatory, and I think it's absolutely that. I was also thinking of it in terms of relapse, you
Sure.
know, and unless actually that the moment on the train is the relapse, then the fact that once he's back, he doesn't jump back on another train or he doesn't hide himself. He says, "Oh, I had this thing that brought me back to the danger area, and now I'm in it. I'm not
Yep.
doing what I can to help myself at this point." And just really spoke to me as being emblematic of that journey. I have no idea whether Farrell's personal story affected the direction of the screenplay at all, but it really feels resonant knowing a little bit of what he was going through in relation to how this character operates in the world. Yeah, really spoke to me.
Do you mind if I switch hats and
Please.
ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Did Ray live?
Boy, it's a tough one. I don't think so. I think what we see, because we hear him say, "I really want it to live." And then we realize we're in his POV, and it goes from seeming like his head is kind of propped up to falling back, I believe. And I think that's the moment of Ray's death. Now, I should say, I talked about this on an episode recently. I love loose threads. Like, I like not knowing. So I believe that's the case, but I'm open to arguments to the contrary, and I love that it's not 100%.
I don't have an argument to the contrary. I struggle with that piece of it. When I get through with the movie, I want him to live, but I don't think he does. But I don't know. And that's that loose thread. Everybody else, you know. I mean, big spoiler alert, but nobody survives this film of the top three characters. This is something that you don't see in a movie very often. The hero always wins. The supporting cast, occasionally you'll lose one, but usually not everybody that's the main character.
It's a good point that it's everybody, because in dark movies, sometimes the hero dies,
Sure.
but then the antagonist wins. In this movie, the antagonist kills himself. It is very unusual that way.
The other thing that I really liked about this, we're talking about the deaths of the main characters, is that both Ken and Harry had very honorable endings, even though Harry's was a mistake. Harry had said if he killed a kid, whether it was on purpose or by accident, I would kill myself on the spot. There wouldn't even be a second question. And then he ends up at the end of the movie, he's shooting at Ray, but he ends up killing Jimmy, the dwarf. And he thinks because they're doing a dream scene and Jimmy's wearing school kids' clothes, he thinks he killed a kid. And he follows through on his own honor and killed himself on the spot. Whereas Ken, the sacrifice was to try and save Ray by letting him know that something is happening, to drawing his attention to the tower and hopefully giving him a gun, that kind of thing. But it was all that entire scene where Ken is first he gets shot in the leg, then he gets shot in the neck because they find out Ray is still there. He drags himself up to the top of the tower and throws himself off to sacrifice another honorable death. Now, Colin Farrell, the only one who's really been deeply struggling with good or bad through this entire movie, really, his was not an honorable death. His was running away. So it's just this weird thing that the one person that was really struggling, it was kind of like he didn't give a shit at the end. It was just like, I'm just trying to get away.
He does something interesting at that end, though, that I think is honorable. He actually tries to tell Harry that he's mistaken, that it's not a child that he killed. And he doesn't have any reason to do that. What would be in his interest is just to let Harry kill himself and give himself some chance to survive. But I see that as a redemptive moment for Ray, that he's going to, at this point, tell the truth.
Yeah, I guess you look at it that way, and you could also look at it that the woman in the motel or the hotel, Ray has a shot at Harry, and he decides not to take that shot because she's standing near Harry, and he basically offers himself up as a challenge to Harry. Okay, let's figure out another way to do this because we don't want her to get hurt in the crossfire. And I love, we talked about the acting job of the woman in the hotel, in that they're basically she tells him more or less grow up and just stop this, and Harry tells her to leave. She tells him to fuck off. This is my hotel. So it was just this brief little thing where Ray is standing at the top of the banister and he's got the gun and there's Harry. He could have taken him out, but
I
the
think
honorable
very
thing did.
I think very important that she is pregnant, because if he
Did
killed her, he would be killing another child. And I
agree.
think we see that calculus on his face.
Yep,
Not that
I
we know
agree.
for sure that he wouldn't have taken the shot if it was just her, but there being a child involved, I think makes that moment that much more resonant.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even when he decides he's gonna kill himself and he goes to the park, before doing so, he wants to leave what money he's got with him with the hotel owner for her child. Not for her, but for her child. So that's always at the forefront of everything that Ray's doing throughout this movie is that I killed a child. I've got to do something to make up for that kind of thing. And I love that when Ken and Ray are discussing Ray's attempted suicide, what Ken says is, "Go find something to do to resurrect it, to make up for this. Help another child. Do something that is going to be redeeming." I think there was a lot of real, like I said, he's a petulant child, but I think there was a lot of deep soul searching in Ray, and a lot of that was he doesn't want to do this anymore. This isn't what he's made for, and he does want to do something to better himself. So I thought there was a lot of redemption in this movie as well.
And you say he doesn't want to do this anymore. I think very interesting that we find out this was his first hit ever.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, Steve, we have hit a lot in this movie, but I want to make sure to give you a little bit of a platform if there is anything we have missed that you feel like, Brad, you idiot, how did you not ask me about this?
No, not really. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think it was a tour de force performance by every actor in that movie. The casting was unbelievable. I loved the music in the background of this movie throughout. It's almost a happy piano, but you can also switch it into kind of a depressed piano background. It was just it was so well pieced together. The pieces where you get a little foreshadowing and then it's popped in there, but subtly. It's not in your face, that kind of thing. The reason I love this movie so much, besides the out loud chuckling, the laughing, is it is a film that even though you're having fun enjoying it, it makes you think. I mean, it's not something that you just laugh and that's it. As a matter of fact, I think the first time I watched this movie, I thought it was okay. You know what I mean? I missed a lot of what it was about because I was more concentrating on the humor and that kind of thing. But the more I watched it, the more I started to really fall in love with this movie. I don't think there will be a year goes by until the day I die where I won't at least see one viewing of In Bruges.
It only grows on each rewatch for me. Steve, one thing we like to do on this show is give people movies to watch. So, of course, we recommend In Bruges. Hopefully, you've watched it before even listening to us here, though. I will tell you, this is the kind of movie that even if you know everything that happens, you got to see how it happens. But for people who are fans of In Bruges, what are some other movies you might recommend to them?
There's really nothing that truly compares to this. I mean, you've got Banshees of Inisherin that has Brandon Gleeson and Colin Farrell, but that's a much darker. It doesn't have the same level of humor, I don't think, as they're both McDonough movies. So that's an obvious comparison. But if I was gonna throw on one of McDonough's movies, I would say Seven Psychopaths. There's a lot of relayering of things that happened earlier. There's the fun character developments, that kind of thing. And Colin Farrell, once again, the characters in it, including him and Sam Rockwell. He is very funny in this movie, and it is more of a comedy movie. There are some heavy themes to it, but it's mostly comedy. I would say maybe Reservoir Dogs because it's definitely dealing with some heavy themes, but there's some really good humor, which a lot of that is basically some dark humor as well. So I like that one, and I would say Gross Point Blank. Yeah,
Oh, a
again.
favorite of mine.
Oh yeah, it was. He's not really struggling with what he does. He's struggling with whether he should continue to do what he does, but it's again great acting, great humor throughout. His ex home becomes a convenience store, and it's just there's just so many cool little pieces to that movie. So just humor wise, I would say Gross Point Blank has got a lot in common.
And very much a slightly different one, but very much a hitman in an existential crisis. The one I thought of, and this is just a favorite movie of mine, is The Long Good Friday. For my money, the best British gangster movie, starring Bob Hoskins. That is the peak of that genre. And while this is not strictly of that genre, it's playing on the tropes of it to build its comedy and build its tragedy. So that's one I would just highly recommend people check out.
Well, one that I would throw in there just as far as the humor component would be Snatch.
Excellent. And I think those first two Guy Ritchie movies, especially, giving a very different but complementary take to what this movie does. Like, those are all frenetic camera movement and a wild feel. This is so much more contained, but there is that humor matchup and obviously that setting matchup of the two.
Yeah,
All right, Steve. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been a blast. I hope you've enjoyed the experience.
very much so.
All right, my friend. I will talk to you soon. That's it for this one, folks. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Thanks go out to Chris Bravender, Brad Kaufman, Jeffrey Glazer, and Julia Mott, who would guard any stairway to protect Colin Farrell. The music you hear at the beginning of the show and now is by my friend Richard Bates and his band The Huns. That's Hons. You can find The Huns music on Bandcamp. On Wednesday, No One Can Hear You Scream, or at least Laura Alcariza and I won't hear you, because we're going to be busy talking up a storm about Alien. We just couldn't stop. This one is going to be a Herculean editing job, but totally worth it. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, all the things. Those reviews in particular, no matter how long or short, really help us reach more people. You can follow us on Instagram at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
Made crazy, stupid money for crazy, stupid things. Is that any part of keeping your heart? If I spent those same days brushing up on poetics, that's 14 times 365 inflection.